Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a fantastic show ahead for you today. Today was not a slow news day. Let's just start there. We have conservative on conservative violence. Not really, but Tucker Carlson, of all people, is getting a lot of backlash from his fellow conservatives, and it's because of an interview that he conducted with a Palestinian Christian. We're gonna get to that later in the first hour of the show. We're also gonna talk about something that is foreshadowing potentially and devastating if it actually does come to fruition. The intelligence community here in the United States is concerned that Iran is planning a retaliatory attack against Israel, which of course would lead to a broader war, a war that would not be easy to win, and a war that we would certainly be dragged into. So we're gonna talk about that in the first hour as well. Later in the show, we'll talk about Trump's legal team making a terrible yet hilarious mistake. So that'll be in the second hour. You don't want to miss that. But as always, just want to encourage you all to like and share the stream if you're watching us live on YouTube. You can also help to support the show by becoming a member by going to tyt.com/join, or just smash that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. In fact, yesterday I did an Ask Me Anything with our members and answered their questions to celebrate my 17 years here at TYT. There were some questions I didn't get to, so we're actually going to extend that and have another day of a bonus episode where I do an Ask Me Anything. So for our members, certainly check that out immediately after our main show. And if you're not a member, you can participate, you can engage, and you can watch by going to tyt.com/join or clicking on that join button. All right, without further ado, I wanted to begin today's show with a story that honestly, I see a lot of people, unfortunately, being misled on, and it's because of a highly edited video. I don't think that people are putting out misinformation intentionally. I think they're basing their analysis on some highly edited videos. And for our purposes today, I just wanted to set the record straight, since I have sat down and I've reviewed all of the evidence, including a lengthy body cam video. So let's get to that story. After deliberating for less than 2 hours, the jury in a viral drunk driving case out of Tallahassee, Florida, has found a 56-year-old man by the name of Calvin Riley guilty of driving under the influence. Now, you must be wondering, why are you covering this story? Who cares? It's a driving under the influence case. It's not that big of a deal. It turns out that the story did go viral when the arrest was made last year in 2023. And it was because a portion of the body cam footage, which was highly edited, made it appear as though one of the officers on the scene had planted evidence on Mr. Riley. And so when you look at the raw, unedited footage of the body cam, the body cam video, you see something entirely different. And I think it's important to set the record straight. So first, it's worth noting that there were some obvious indicators that Calvin Riley was in fact driving while under the influence. In fact, I grabbed a still frame from the body cam footage itself because when he was pulled over, he didn't pull over on the side of the road. He pulled over in the middle of the road, which is a strange thing to do, to say the least. So that was the first, well, not the first sign. That was one of the signs that he was in fact driving under the influence. He was pulled over, as you can see, and if you take a look at the initial interaction that the officer in this case, which is Tallahassee Police Department Officer Kirsten Oliver, and the way that she spoke to Mr. Riley, you get a sense of what their interaction was like, of course, but you also get a sense of why she decided to pull him over in the first place. So let's take a look at the first clip and then I'll fill in the blanks.
There's a reason why you slowed me down.
Yes, sir. So you don't have any headlights on and you're going really fast down Monroe Street.
Headlight? My headlights automatically on when I'm driving.
They're not on right now.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No problem.
So I think she handled that the way that a police officer should when they pull someone over. He asked her, hey, why are you pulling me over? Why are you slowing me down, is what he asked her. And she very clearly stated, look, you were driving very quickly and erratically and you have your headlights off. And he seemed to be unaware of the fact that his headlights are off. I have to be honest, there have been instances where my headlights were off and I didn't realize it. That's not necessarily an indication that you're drunk, but the interaction that followed kind of made it abundantly clear that he was under the influence. So let's take a look at the next clip because, well, before we do, let me give you some more context. So Riley was unable to provide a driver's license, okay? So that was another issue, and ultimately that ended up being the reason why he was arrested. We're gonna get to that in just a second. Now, despite the narrative that he was originally pulled over because the officer smelled pot, as you just heard in that interaction, that was not the reason why he was pulled over. The officer clearly communicated with him that the stop was due to his driving, his fast driving, and the fact that the headlights were turned off. The officer then speaks to a secondary officer who arrived on the scene and makes clear that the stop was made for a specific purpose. So let's take a look at that.
He didn't have lights on, he's flying down Monroe Street, and when I went to pull him over, he like started to get over and then came back over and then like is kind of like hovering and then stopped. Okay. So if you'll just see if you can see. Talk to him first. So he's got suspended. It's Calvin Riley. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask him. That's why he doesn't have a driver's license, because he knows it's suspended.
So she notes there that he didn't provide a driver's license because he knows that it's suspended. That is ultimately the reason why he is put in handcuffs. We're gonna get to that video in a moment, but first, some more details, more context. The secondary officer at that point goes to speak to Mr. Riley and basically try to find out whether he was in fact under the influence. So let's take a look at how that went down.
Yeah, he said he's coming from Pockets and he had beers at Pockets. Oh, he didn't tell me that?
I asked him that because he originally said the north side and I said we're out on the north side and he said Pockets.
See, he told me he was coming from Brevard Street. Holy crap, this scared me. So he did say he had beers at Pockets?
Yeah.
Do you get any other indications?
I mean, his speech is slurred and
yeah.
He's got the watery bloodshot eyes and I do have odor.
So at that point, the secondary police officer went to speak to him, asked if he had been drinking that night. He told her that he went to a sports bar known as Pockets Pool and Pub. He confessed to drinking a few beers. And at that point, they ask him if he is willing to do a field sobriety test. Let's take a look.
beers that you said you had. Yeah. Would you be willing to do some voluntary sobriety exercises? No? Okay. Here, go ahead and step out of the vehicle for us.
Declines the tests and is asked to step out of the vehicle. He will now be taken into custody for driving with a suspended license.
Your license is suspended, so we're gonna...
No problem.
So as you can see, the reason why they put him in handcuffs and they placed him under arrest is because of the fact that he was driving without a valid license. He had a suspended license. And so a search of his vehicle has not even taken place at this point. He is already arrested, okay? With that in mind, Riley did decline to do a field sobriety test, but things after that start to get a little bit heated because one of the officers indicates that she can smell marijuana. He denies that he has any marijuana on him. That's where he gets a little upset. Let's take a look at how that went down.
So I smelled marijuana in your vehicle. Did you recently smell?
No, let me tell you something, man.
Stand right here.
Let me tell you something.
Stand
I don't know. You heard what you just said. You smell marijuana, right?
Yeah.
I don't even smoke. So
Okay.
what? But you come with that. That's little plug.
Okay.
Okay? This right
Do you
here?
have a medical marijuana card?
No, I don't smoke nothing.
Have you recently smoked pen?
I don't smoke nothing.
Okay.
So you trying that dude? That's my money right there for my job.
I got you.
So
I'm
let
not
me
saying
tell you
that's right.
something. You see my back of my shirt? What that show? I show you I'm a ball. You understand what I'm saying? So what you're saying is you smell marijuana. You're alive.
Now they did eventually do a search of his vehicle. They did not find marijuana, but I did want to show that video mostly because of what the police officer said she smelled, how he reacted to it. I think it's also important to hear how he's speaking because that was one of the other indicators that he was potentially under the influence when he was behind the wheel in that car. So at that point, they decide to basically figure out if they have what's necessary to search his car, probable cause. So they suspect that he's drunk, but do they have enough reasons to believe that he is under the influence to justify them searching the vehicle? And they have a conversation about that. That's what you're gonna hear in the next video. Let's take a look.
Wow, he reeks of alcohol. Is there enough, like before that?
Okay, so they're talking about it. Is there enough? And they, at that point, feel that they have enough evidence indicating that he was likely drinking and driving or under the influence of something and driving, right? Remember, one of the police officers spoke to him. He said that he had been at a bar, he had a few beers, he pulled over in the middle of the road, he had been driving erratically. So all of those things led them to feel that they had the probable cause necessary to search his vehicle. And at that point, they decide to search his vehicle. So let's take a look at how that search went down in the raw, unedited body cam footage.
Okay, nothing in there. Smell this. It smells like alcohol. Yep. I think we're good on this. Yeah. Okay.
So at first, the first thing that they find is a tumbler with alcohol in it. So that was another indication that he had been drinking and driving. Now, what you're about to watch is the most controversial part of the body cam footage because in the video that was released earlier, the one that was heavily edited, it appeared as though one of the officers had planted evidence in the car, meaning she had planted an open container of alcohol in the vehicle, right? So let's take a look at what actually happened and then I'll fill in the blanks and explain a little more when we come back.
Hey, there's vodka in his seat, like right here in a pouch in his seat. Vodka was found in this pouch in his seat.
So right there, you see that she did in fact discover a small bottle of vodka in the vehicle, right? In a pouch in his seat. So she takes it out, she shows it. Keep in mind, she's wearing a body cam. If you're gonna plant evidence, you probably shouldn't be wearing a body cam, or you should turn the body cam off. But then she makes a bad decision. And I will say it's a bad decision because she shouldn't have done this. Now, some police departments have a policy of, if you find alcohol in a vehicle, right, you pour it out before you impound the car. I don't know if that's the policy for the Tallahassee Police Department, but that is what everyone saw in the initial video that went viral, right? They see her take that bottle of vodka and essentially pour it out and then place it back in the vehicle. And they felt, the people who have been criticizing these two police officers felt that that was evidence of them planting evidence in his vehicle. So here's that moment, let's take a look. Officer who believed the bottle was already opened broke the seal. She proceeded to follow department practice, which is to discard open alcohol. All of the contents of the bottle were emptied. The officer put the bottle back into the vehicle as it held no evidentiary value. And so that was the moment that led to all sorts of rumors, allegations against the police officers who had responded to this incident, who had pulled him over. And Officer Oliver, right? So one of the officers, the one who initially pulled him over, opened a bottle of vodka, a bottle that had never been opened before. This is what the defense attorney had said during the trial. You hear her break the seal, which is true, pour it out, which is true, and put it back in the car, which is true. Then she used that evidence against him. That part is not true. That bottle of alcohol was not used as evidence against him. There were all sorts of other things that they had found that were used as evidence against him in this trial. And it was persuasive enough for the jury to make a decision that he was guilty after deliberating for under 2 hours. But understand that he was not arrested for having an open container of alcohol in his vehicle. He was arrested for driving with a suspended license. He was pulled over because he was driving erratically, which I am honestly willing to believe, considering he pulled over in the middle of the road and he didn't pull over on the shoulder or on the side of the road. And I just think that there was a lot of context missing in the original reporting of this story, and I can totally understand why people would be misled by that incomplete reporting. But when you look at the full body cam footage, and we will link to it in the description box of this video so you can watch the whole video for yourself, you see how everything really went down, and there's really no indication that anyone planted any evidence to incriminate this man. It appears that he is in fact under the influence. Now, according to CNN, during the trial, the officer admitted opening the bottle and putting it back in the car was a mistake. She and another responding officer denied the bottle was used as evidence to support the DUI charge. And again, to be clear, there were other factors that were used as evidence to support the DUI charge. And also the arguments about the open container of alcohol being planted makes no sense, since Riley was never even charged with having an open container of alcohol in his vehicle. Originally, Riley was charged with driving under the influence and driving with a suspended or revoked license. That latter charge was dropped during the trial. Jurors had to decide whether Riley was the operator of the vehicle and if prosecutors proved he was impaired at the time of his arrest. And apparently prosecutors did a decent job in proving that, because the jury did in fact find him guilty. And look, here's what they use. This is what they turned to make their case, right? He admitted to them on the scene that he had been drinking. The fact that he pulled over in the middle of the road shows that he was inebriated, okay? He was slurring his speech in the video as well. Obviously, if you watch the full body cam footage, you'll hear more of him speaking and conversing with the officers, and you can hear his slurred speech. Now, before sentencing, Riley apologized and took responsibility, which I think is also a missing piece to this story that doesn't get reported. So this was right before he was sentenced. Here's what he had to say while he was in court.
I accept the responsibility for getting upset and let my emotions get over my judgment of just being a person and staying calm. Like I stated before, I was only going through this emotional stuff because the past I've been through with law enforcement and what I started going through that night with these officers, it was just a repeat of what I experienced growing up here. And it made me very upset and angry. And if anyone was hurt in that moment, I apologize, but at the same time, I was hurt too.
Now, as for his punishment, remember he's drinking and driving, they found him guilty. Well, what was he sentenced to? Riley, 56, was sentenced to spend 10 days in the Leon County Jail. He was also sentenced to 6 months of probation. As part of his sentence, Riley must also attend a DUI course, perform 50 hours of community service, participate in random breathalyzer tests, and his driver's license will be suspended for 6 months, which I think is a perfectly fine punishment considering how serious it is when someone decides to get behind the wheel when they are drunk. Because at that point, it's not just about their behavior possibly impacting them and their life because they could very easily crash, cause an accident. But obviously it's an incredibly selfish decision because there are other people on the road. And I personally have lost someone that I've known to a drunk driver. So drunk driving is a serious thing. And to provide cover for anyone who's drunk driving or to minimize the severity of that issue in order to engage in what I've been seeing online about this man and about this case, I think is just unacceptable, right? I feel like the drunk driving really took a back seat, and the seriousness of drunk driving took a back seat in this story because the focus was on the race of the police officer who pulled him over because she was a white woman, and the race of Riley, a black man. And I think that when you see everything through the lens of race, sometimes it can blind you to what the facts are. And what the facts are in this case is that a man made a decision to get drunk, get behind the wheel of a vehicle, and drive erratically in early morning hours. And I did not see a moment in that body cam footage, and I watched it from beginning to end, showing the officers disrespect him or in any way violate his rights. But that is not the narrative that you're gonna hear from one half of the political spectrum that is just absolutely convinced that they planted evidence in this man's vehicle. Remember, he had a tumbler with alcohol in it. It wasn't just about the bottle of vodka, and the bottle of vodka was not used as evidence against him in this trial. Now, some people have been critical of the police officers because a few minor details of these interaction were changed after they had filed their police report on it. But when you're in the moment of it, right? Sometimes when you're having a conversation or you're explaining to the other officer what you experienced, you might not get every single detail correct, right? That's why it's important to review the body cam footage, and when you put the details in a police report, you get those details correct. So there was a moment where she was speaking to another officer and she had said that there was an open container of alcohol in the vehicle. There was an open container of alcohol in the vehicle. It was the tumbler, probably what she was referring to. She believed that the closed bottle, the sealed bottle of vodka was in fact opened, but it wasn't. I mean, you can hear it click open as she breaks the seal. But again, if we're gonna be hyper focused on that one thing, which is the bottle of vodka, what that ends up doing is it ends up ignoring all of the other evidence surrounding this case, which made it abundantly clear that Riley was in fact drunk behind the wheel. So I think this is a teachable moment because it's important to wait and see what the full details of a specific case or a specific story happen to be. I know that people get real fired up about these stories and they want to jump on it immediately. Try to avoid doing that. Wait until you have access to the full body cam footage and don't rely on highly edited videos that other people put out there as they narrate to you what they believe happened. And one final thing I'll say about this. This is one of the viral cases that's now being used to make an argument that police officers should no longer be allowed to do traffic stops. I think that would be a disastrous policy I think that would be a terrible idea. In Los Angeles, where the city council is in fact unfortunately considering this, we're currently dealing with things like street takeovers. We're dealing with hit and run incidents where pedestrians are getting hit by cars, by drivers who then flee the scene. The idea that we don't need police officers to do traffic stops is absolutely ridiculous. And in place of police officers, they want these unarmed ambassadors to do the traffic stops, completely ignoring the fact that we live in a country that is swimming with guns. We've got a ton of guns. We have a ton of people who have guns in their vehicles. The idea that we're gonna have like unarmed, community ambassadors do traffic stops, to me is a ridiculous idea. If we have issues with policing, if we want to provide better training and reforms, we should focus on that. But the idea of doing away with policing overall is just not something that I can get behind. And I certainly will not get behind the idea of using a case like this that was misreported wildly as an excuse for pursuing those types of policies. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll get into the potential war with Iran and what our intelligence community is saying. That and more coming up, don't miss it. Sam G writes in our member section, says, although that may be true, we have such a problem with police misconduct in this nation that it's easy to automatically jump to that conclusion. I agree with you. I totally agree with you on that, but it's important to not jump to conclusions, right? It's important to wait to see what the evidence bears out, because you don't want to, number one, defame people who didn't do anything wrong, but more importantly, sow more fear into society by pointing to instances of police misconduct where misconduct doesn't actually exist. But I totally hear you on that. And that's why I'm totally understanding toward those who reported the story in a certain way, because there has been that issue, and that issue leads you to believe when these cases arise that automatically the police are probably guilty. And I've had that urge myself, and I've learned to kind of hold back and try to suppress that urge and instead wait for more details to come out. Avenger Dragon 89 in our Twitch sub says, DUI while suspended license, really? That's what it appears happened in that case, yes, it's unfortunate. Occam's Taser says, I'm celebrating my 17th year of not working at TYT. Congratulations, I mean, that sounds pretty good. Pokeboy 808 says, this guy needs better attorneys. If you can't find reasonable doubt from planted evidence, you need to do better. All right, well, there's no evidence that there was planted evidence. That was the point of the story, but I get that some people want to reject it because it goes against preconceived notions. Preconceived notions are difficult to dispense of, I totally understand. Let's go to our members. In fact, thank you to everyone who gifted members, including Michael Cotavelli, who gifted 20 TYT memberships. We also have Sweden, Dragon, who gifted 5 TYT memberships, and Joe Gutierrez, who gifted 5 TYT memberships. In our super chat section, we have Eid Mubarak, or Happy Eid, to all fellow Muslims across the world, especially for my fellow brothers and sisters in Palestine, even though unfortunately it will never be the same. My prayers are with them. Free Palestine. Thank you for that comment. Let's go to YTP Renewed, who says, how do we submit questions for the next Ask Me Anything? So I think that we closed that. I'm not entirely sure. Let me just ask before I answer that question, because I don't want to give you the wrong answer. But we had some leftover questions from yesterday that I want to try to answer for today's bonus episode. All right, we've got TK3199. Happy TYT 17th anniversary, Anna. I have turned my entire department onto TYT, and the replaying of The Daily Show has become known as Anna O'Clock, approximately 2 p.m. Thank you so much. I'm curious where you work. I'm curious about your department. J Mad writes in and says, Anna, yesterday on the bonus episode was the first time I heard about your sexual assault. Yeah. I am so deeply sorry you went through that, but you are strong, TYT strong. I appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, thank you for watching and thank you for supporting. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show. Before I get to some international news and a potential broader regional war in the Middle East, just wanted to read Morgan's super chat and thank him or her, I'm not sure, for this comment. Facts matter, truth matters. Everyone must continue to examine their biases. Thanks for reporting on context, Anna. Progressive values for the win. And you're right, for me, progressive values mean that we try to seek the truth, try to seek what the reality of every incident that we talk about really is. And for me personally, my responsibility is not to any political group or any activist group. My responsibility is to the audience. I can't live with myself knowing that I've misled you guys in any way. So if I ever get anything wrong and you have proof that I've gotten it wrong, please keep me accountable and let me know, because I don't want to mislead you guys or report on anything inaccurately. But thank you for that comment and I appreciate the support. Well, let's talk a little bit about what the intelligence community is alleging about Iran and an imminent attack against Israel.
The wicked Zionist regime made another mistake and staged an attack on Iran's consulate, which means an attack on the country's soil, a violation of international norm. It made a mistake, and the regime needs to be punished and will be punished.
The United States and its allies believe Iran or its proxies may soon launch an attack against targets in Israel as retaliation for Israel's strike on an Iranian consulate in Syria just last week. Now, it would be a giant escalation of war, and it would put the Middle East at risk of a significantly broader regional war. Now, we should be careful in considering the allegations coming from anonymous intelligence sources. I'm always super skeptical of anonymous sources coming from the intelligence community, especially after Americans were misled into a preemptive war in Iraq with the media using anonymous intelligence sources. But nonetheless, with that in mind, let's get to what's being reported. So the potential assault, possibly using high precision missiles, may happen in coming days. People familiar with the intelligence said, requesting anonymity to discuss confidential matters. It is seen as more a matter of when, not if, one of the people said, based on assessments from US and Israeli intelligence. Now, also keep in mind that even before this current war on Gaza, Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu in particular have been trying to egg the United States on in engaging in a hot war with Iran. This has been ongoing for many years now. Netanyahu succeeded in persuading Donald Trump to rip up the Iran nuclear deal, which unfortunately led to worse relations between the United States and Iran, and also allowed for Iran, because there's no longer oversight and there's no longer an Iran nuclear deal, it allowed for Iran to continue developing nuclear weapons. I mean, there's really nothing stopping them at this point, right? The Iran nuclear deal being torn to shreds by Trump was actually a terrible, terrible decision. Now, Iran's main proxy group, Hezbollah, which is based in southern Lebanon, has in fact been trading fire with the IDF almost daily since the war in Gaza began. But the Iranian military itself, this is important, has not carried out attacks. Iran's military has not carried out attacks. And while, yes, it is true that Iran funds these proxy groups, including Hezbollah, I think it would be a mistake to assume that Iran directed Hezbollah to do those attacks against Israel. It does appear that Iran has lost a little bit of control over these proxy groups. And if we're going to attack Iran militarily and use the proxy groups as an excuse, I think we need real evidence indicating that Iran directed these groups to target Israel, and we haven't seen any of that evidence at all. Now, this threat comes in the wake of a strike on an Iranian consulate building in the capital of Syria, which was widely believed to be carried out by Israel, although they haven't explicitly taken responsibility for it. That strike ended up killing high-ranking officials within the Iranian military, and it also left 12 people total dead. Now, in a speech yesterday, Ayatollah Khamenei made clear that they did plan to seek revenge. So to be fair to the intelligence community that's worried about an attack being imminent, Iran's really not doing itself any favors because they're saying that they're planning on attacking Israel. Let's take a look. Oh wait, actually before we do, he also criticized the West, particularly the United States and Britain, for supporting Israel in its war on Gaza. He said this, quote, "It was expected they would prevent Israel in this disaster. They did not fulfill their duties, the Western governments," he said. Now, that is likely why the White House is worried that Iran might strike a US target, according to reporting from The Intercept. But it is believed that should Iran actually follow through with these threats, should they do a direct strike or target the United States or Israel, well, they would very likely target specific, military infrastructure. They would have specific targets rather than going after, civilian areas. So here's more on the various potential ways Iran could carry out an attack. Let's look.
There's concern, especially now coming also from the Pentagon. We're hearing that this attack could happen as early as this week. So the military is on high alert. The question is, how would Iran retaliate? And there are several options. One is to use its proxies, and like Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and the militias in Iraq. We've seen some of that already. Or they could perhaps strike at Israeli diplomatic missions abroad, or they could send drones and ballistic missiles from Iran itself targeting Israel. Now, if that happens, then we're really talking about a huge, major escalation, the danger of a major regional war, and the US could also get drawn into that.
No, the US would 100% be drawn into that. Israel would not be able to fight that war on its own. So the United States would be involved, but not simply through sending more military weaponry to Israel. I mean, that would certainly happen for sure, but we would need to have boots on the ground, literally. If there is a hot war between Iran and Israel, the US would get involved, and the US would absolutely, considering Iran's military capability, would absolutely need to risk the lives of our men and women in that war. Now, think about what is leading to these threats of an attack from Iran. It was Israel carrying out a strike on an Iranian consulate in Syria. Obviously, that is going to have repercussions. Obviously. But the United States keeps enabling this kind of behavior from Israel, knowing full well that it could lead to an expanded, broader regional war in the Middle East that would require American troops on the ground. It is incredibly irresponsible, yet it is something that has continued to be enabled by the Biden administration. So we continue. A direct Iranian strike on an Israeli city would be a first and intensify hostilities in a major way. Last week, Israel scrambled navigational signals over the Tel Aviv metropolitan area in preparation for a potential attack. Who's winning here? Who's winning here? Poor people living in Tel Aviv, terrified of an imminent attack by Iran after their government decided to do a strike in Syria. Is Israel at war with Syria? Is it okay for Israel to just do their strikes wherever they want and we're just gonna continue providing the weapons for it, knowing full well that it could lead to an expanded regional war? Are we as Americans comfortable with our engagement in a broader regional war in the Middle East? Biden was asked about the possibility of a retaliatory strike from Iran, and he, of course, promised to do what we all expect him to do, back up Israel no matter what. Let's watch.
We also want to address the Iranian threat to launch a significant, they're threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel. As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
What about the US's security? What about the security of the men and women who are in our military? Are we concerned about their security? Are we at all worried about dragging them into a war that could have been prevented? I guess not. I guess their security doesn't matter. In fact, the US is already getting involved, according to reporting from Axios. They write that General Eric Kurilla, the senior US military commander in charge of the Middle East, is expected to go to Israel Thursday, meaning today, to coordinate around a possible attack on Israel and Iran and its proxies, two Israeli officials said. Now, the general will meet with the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and senior IDF officials. And over the past few days, Israel and the United States have also they've been coordinating with one another on joint air and missile defense in the region. That's according to an Israeli official who spoke to Axios. And of course, Israel is also saying that if Iran attacks on their soil, they will attack Iran on their soil. Yoav Gallant said during a visit to an Iron Dome missile defense unit in Israel, quote, "Whoever tries to attack us will be faced with strong defense and right after with strong response in its territory." Obviously, with the help of the United States supplying them with the weapons to further escalate this conflict. And Netanyahu doubled down, telling pilots that he visited an F-15, that he visited at an F-15 base. "We set a simple principle: anyone who hits us, we hit them." But you guys did a strike on an Iranian consulate in Syria. Like, does Israel ever take responsibility for its actions? Ever? Is that ever allowed? Is that ever allowed? That's never allowed, I guess. That's never allowed. Right, we're all gonna pretend, let's say Iran, and I really hope they don't, I really do. I really hope they avoid doing this because it would be a disaster. But if Iran decides to do a strike against Israel on their soil, is the American press going to get together and have the same narrative about how like, oh, where did this come from? Iran just hates Israel and just came out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't come out of nowhere. I'm gonna read Benjamin Netanyahu's statement again. "We set a simple principle: anyone who hits us, we hit them. We are ready to fulfill our responsibilities to Israel's security in defense and attack." Were you ready on October 7th, Netanyahu? Was he ready to defend and protect Israeli civilians on October 7th? He wasn't ready. I mean, he had no problem funding Hamas, funneling money to Hamas. He had no problem doing that. He had no problem ensuring that IDF soldiers were guarding illegal settlements in the West Bank, which led to a situation in which Hamas terrorists were carrying out atrocities on October 7th for hours before the IDF could even respond to it. Because they thought, we've got Gaza under control. We don't need to worry about Gaza. Let's send our IDF soldiers over to the West Bank to ensure that those illegal settlements that were built by settlers are protected. Why did it take 6 hours for the IDF to respond to those atrocities, to protect Israeli civilians? I want to know, how come that's never talked about? Netanyahu puffing up his chest and pretending like he's the savior, the protector, the defender of Israeli civilians is real rich, considering the fact that he funded Hamas. And now he is hell-bent on dragging the United States and our men and women in our military in a regional war, in a hot war with Iran, which would not be a joke, considering their military capability. Insanely irresponsible, not just of Netanyahu, which at this point I have come accustomed to. I expect it from Netanyahu, but incredibly irresponsible behavior from our own president, from Joe Biden. Has there been any condemnation for the strikes that the IDF has done in other sovereign countries, which is escalating the situation? No, of course not. We keep sending them the weapons. And there's a price to pay for that. Unfortunately, the people who usually pay the price are ordinary Americans who serve in our military. We gotta take a break, we'll be right back. All right, so Sweet Dane Dragon wrote back in. Thank you for the super chat. Google Sweet Danes was a famous music coalition back in the days. I picked my dragon name from being half Swede, half Danish, so Sweet Dane is my handle. I like that explanation, thank you. And thanks for helping me understand how to pronounce it as well. So, all right, thank you to Gunny Chaos, who gifted 5 TYT memberships. Benjamin Morrill, who gifted 5 TYT memberships as well. Benjamin Webster gifted 1, and Anna's Tommy Gun gifted 1 TYT membership. Every time I read your handle, I want to do but my Tommy Gun don't. So anyway, all right, let's go over to our Twitch subs. We have Electric Snow, who says, I have had several field sobriety tests, was able to pass them all, but I'm older now. I couldn't pass even sober, so I would decline too. Green New Dealer Dragon says, if your license is suspended, don't drive, get a bike or a horse. Yeah, I mean, don't drive on a suspended license, and don't drive under the influence either. Electric Snow says, I got hit by a drunk driver, a truck versus a Geo Prism. Oh my God, that's insane. So Geo Prism is a small car. I dropped charges because the man only had an 8th grade education and just needed help, really. All right, well, that is a kind thing to do. I hope that person never got behind a wheel while under the influence again, because that is a serious and dangerous, irresponsible thing to do. Trump is un-American says, I always get so pumped at the TYT kickoff time. Thank you. I do sometimes. Other times I'm panicked because there's a bunch of stuff that I wanted to look into before doing the show. And I always question whether I know enough before I share some of the news with you guys. But thank you for writing in. Jay, the okayest mailman says, Solo Anna again, but hold on to them. Eclectic Miscellanea says, hi everyone and happy belated 17th anniversary, Anna. It looks like your anniversary gift from TYT is that you have to do another solo hour today. Yeah, so Cenk was out of town because he was debating about immigration. And so he should be back soon, but yeah, I'm doing the entire show solo today as a result of Cenk being out. Deanne Loso says, because I feel that everyone at TYT and the members are my extended family, I'd like to ask you all to send some good vibes and positive thoughts my way. I had to call 911 early this morning because my husband was having trouble breathing. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He suffers from congestive heart failure, so whenever this happens, it really frightens me. He's in the hospital for a few days. If you all could keep us in your thoughts, I truly appreciate it. Deanne, you are in my thoughts. I know I'm not religious, and so to say I'm praying for you wouldn't make much sense, but I'm thinking about you, and I have no doubt that the TYT community has you and your husband on their mind and in their hearts. Theater Goddess writes in and says, people believe he was pulled over because the cop smelled marijuana. How was the cop supposed to smell anything from his car while in hers with both of them moving? I know, it's ridiculous. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. A special thanks to our member, Stiff Upper Lib, who writes in and says, I was thinking of watching ABC, CBS, or NBC for my news tonight, but Anna seems to be holding her own. I'll stay here instead. I hope I don't let you down. So I hope you're still here. I hope you're watching, and thank you for supporting what we're doing here at TYT. All right, well, I wanted to get to a fascinating story involving a big blow up between conservatives. In this case, you have conservatives speaking out against Tucker Carlson of all people. What? And it really had to do with an interview he recently conducted. Let's take a look.
A consistent but almost never noted theme of American foreign policy is that it is always the Christians who suffer. When there's a war abroad that the United States is funding, it is Christians who tend to die disproportionately. There is virtually never a word about the Christians who live there, the ancient Christian community in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel proper. So because no one has said a word, there has been great suffering among the Christian population in that region. In October, a Greek Orthodox church in the Gaza Strip was hit by an airstrike. We're showing the video now.
Tucker Carlson is getting a lot of backlash from his fellow conservatives after he decided to conduct an interview with a Palestinian Lutheran pastor by the name of Dr. Munther Isaac. You might be familiar with him. We actually did cover a few stories involving him. He's a pastor in Bethlehem, and during Christmas, he was the one who had Jesus surrounded by, like a little Jesus doll surrounded by rubble to basically draw attention to what Palestinians in Gaza are facing. He did that in lieu of a nativity scene, and so he has gotten some press attention in the past. But the fact that Tucker Carlson sat down with him and spoke to him about what Palestinian Christians are going through currently is what has led to a lot of the backlash. Now, the discussion engaged many on the right, or I should say enraged many on the right, including Representative Dan Crenshaw, and we're gonna get to his statements in just a moment. But before we do, why don't we take a look at some of the clips of the conversation that Tucker Carlson had with Isaac, and then we'll fill in the blanks, get to some details about the reality on the ground for Christians in Israel, in the West Bank, in Gaza. Let's get to it.
We continue to be horrified by what we hear from Congress, with, of course, some exceptions. There are some on the Democratic side. Of course, Rashida Tlaib comes from a Palestinian heritage. But when you look at the so-called religious right, we receive no sympathy whatsoever. Tucker, in this war, there was pastors who openly called, for example, to turn Gaza into a parking lot. It's not about one political party or the other. I remember even during the Trump administration, we pleaded as a Christian community. We pleaded that moving the embassy doesn't help. We pleaded that a peace treaty with other Arab countries, as much as I want to see peace, if you don't start with the Palestinians, it's not going to help. But again, it seems our perspective is never taken seriously. And look, now we're paying the results of years and years and years of American foreign policy. There is a very, very brutal war taking place in Gaza, a war that I've described using the word genocide, because it's a war that has used even starvation as a mean. And fellow Christians are suffering because of that war.
Now, look, obviously, when it comes to the suffering of Palestinians, the vast majority of them happen to be, of Muslim faith. That has gotten the majority of the attention. And the fact that Tucker Carlson is drawing attention to Christian Palestinians, I believe, is upsetting conservatives who are hardliners in supporting Israel, because it leads to a level of cognitive dissonance to some extent, right? I feel that Muslims, Palestinian Muslims specifically, have been demonized and dehumanized so effectively in the discourse here in the United States that it's kind of easy to justify what Israel is doing, because quite honestly, the way I hear people talk about Palestinians, it's almost as if their lives don't matter. They're not as important, right? It's worth taking out entire families if Israel suspects that there's a single Hamas militant hiding among them. And that, to me, again, really communicates to the world, okay, well, the lives of those innocent Palestinian civilians just don't matter enough, or don't matter as much. Would the IDF do the same thing if there was a family of Israeli civilians who were being held hostage by a single Hamas militant, would they just bomb that house? I mean, I doubt it. But what this conversation drew attention to was the persecution of Palestinians who are not Muslim, the persecution of Palestinians who happen to be Christian. And as we know, in America, the conservative right has a soft spot for Christians. So I think that's part of what led to so much of the backlash that Tucker Carlson is getting for having this sit-down interview. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and say I agreed with everything in that interview, or I agree with everything this Lutheran pastor has said in the past. I haven't consumed or listened to everything he said in the past. But I do feel that given what I heard in this interview, the weird backlash that you're seeing from conservatives isn't really fueled by the content of the interview itself. It's more about the fact that Tucker Carlson is drawing attention to Palestinian Christians and the persecution that they have experienced. With that said, and as for Tucker's commentary, this clip from later in the interview is what has apparently attracted the most attention.
If you wake up in the morning and decide that your Christian faith requires you to support a foreign government blowing up churches and killing Christians, I think you've lost the thread.
And look, a broad thing that I kind of take issue with in regard to this exchange and the conversation surrounding this exchange is that it doesn't matter what the religion of the innocent people getting killed is. I don't care if they're Jewish, I don't care if they're Muslim, I don't care if they're Christian. The loss of innocent life or the devaluing of human lives is what disgusts me about this entire war, about this conflict. Okay, I found it absolutely reprehensible, disgusting, the atrocities that Hamas had carried out against Israeli civilians. I will never defend that. I will never make excuses for that, period. Same goes for the lives lost on the Palestinian side. The carelessness in which some of these airstrikes and the aerial bombardments have been. It's just, the devaluing of human life is what's been killing me day in and day out about this ongoing war. So whether they're Christian Palestinians, Muslim Palestinians, I don't care. And I think it's weird that for some people, the faith of the individuals who have been killed seems to be important. I don't find it important at all. What their religious beliefs are does not matter. What matters is, were these innocent civilians and were they unjustly killed? Now, what Tucker said there sounds like some pretty tough words, but Tucker never really showed any sympathy for Palestinians as a whole, right? So he limited his commentary to what Israel is doing to Christians specifically. I do take issue with that. And this next clip is a good example illustrating what I mean.
It'd be pretty easy for Republicans in the US Congress to say we support the government of Israel. But if you touch a single Christian, harm a single church, prevent any Christian from practicing his religion, you're done. Not a single dollar will come from the US Congress for you.
So look, let's get to the criticism because I'm going way too long with this story, but it's important to understand like what the critics are saying. And so I mentioned Dan Crenshaw earlier, Republican congressman from Texas. He saw the conversation. I don't know if he saw the whole thing, but he was very triggered by it and put out a statement on X saying that this is who Tucker is, a click chaser. Tucker's MO is simple: defend America's enemies and attack America's allies. There isn't an objective bone left in that washed up news host's body. Mindless contrarianism is his guiding principle, buttressed by his childish tactic to just ask questions. I don't think that it is a childish tactic to ask questions. I think these types of conversations are important. I get that maybe these types of conversations yield information that might offend the sensitivities of conservatives who are hardline supporters of Israel. But the fact remains that Palestinian Christians are caught up in this war just as much as Palestinian Muslims. There's more. He says that Tucker wants you to believe he is the last place you can go for the truth, that he's the only one brave enough to reveal the elitist lies being told. This nonsense about Christian mistreatment in Israel is just the latest example. Well, I mean, there has been mistreatment. There's absolutely been mistreatment of Palestinian Christians. Are we gonna pretend like that doesn't exist? That's not a made up thing. It's not something that Tucker made up. It's not something that, the pastor he was speaking to made up. It's something that is well evidenced, well documented. Okay, so first, let's talk about Bethlehem, where this pastor is from. So 78% of Bethlehem's Christians said that they were leaving Bethlehem because of the Israeli occupation, while only 3.2% blamed the rise of Islamic movements. 12.5% attributed them leaving Bethlehem to both. And that's according to a poll that was done back in December of 2006. So one of the criticisms that you'll hear from conservatives against Tucker Carlson is that no. The Palestinian Christians ended up leaving Bethlehem. The population of Palestinian Christians in Bethlehem has decreased significantly, specifically because of the Islamic movements that have taken place, because of the PLO. They'll, of course, find a way to blame other Palestinians for it. In reality, after they were polled, after they left and they were polled about their reasons for leaving, they made it abundantly clear it was the Israeli occupation, but that'll get ignored, right? Dan Crenshaw also said Tucker will eventually fade into nothingness because his veneer of faux intellectualism is quickly falling apart and revealing who he truly is, a cowardly, know-nothing elitist who is full of, and then he uses a word I can't say, synonymous with crap. So notice that Dan Crenshaw didn't really offer any argument here. A lot of criticisms toward Tucker Carlson, a lot of attacks, a lot of name calling, but he didn't make a single case for why Tucker Carlson was wrong in interviewing this pastor. The Daily Wire's Andrew Klavan also weighed in saying, okay, so if Ben Shapiro, a patriotic American Jew, cares deeply about America's great Jewish ally, that's disloyal. But if Tucker Carlson spreads anti-Israeli distortions and lies in defense of terrorist murderers holding American hostages, that's patriotism, got it. Well, I mean, I watched the interview. I didn't see any example of Tucker Carlson defending Hamas or justifying what Hamas did. But what Klavan did here is a common tactic, right? Where they put words in people's mouths to make them appear as though they're coming from an anti-Semitic place. Now, Tucker Carlson might be anti-Semitic, I have no idea. But what I do know about the specific conversation that's drawing the ire of some conservatives is that it drew attention to the persecution of Christians, something that conservatives are supposed to care about. They certainly care about it deeply when they claim that Christians are being persecuted here in the United States, even though there's no evidence of that. And so it is kind of fascinating to see them not want to draw any attention to that, not draw any attention to that reality. So I think that's really what's behind the anger that you're seeing among some conservatives. But with that said, I want to go to the very last video because, look, to the Israeli government's credit, when some of the extremists on their side have violently attacked Christians, they have spoken out against it. I wish they would do more to protect people. We don't see enough of the Israeli government protecting people. But I want to show you this video because it is in fact true that not just Palestinians, but also Christians in areas like the West Bank, in areas like Jerusalem, have been dealing with a lot of violent behavior coming from extremists on the Israeli side. Let's take a look.
In recent months, we've seen very serious phenomena towards the Christian denominations in the Holy Land. Our brothers and sisters, Christian citizens, feel attacked in their places of prayer, in their cemeteries and on the streets.
Christians in Jerusalem's Old City say they are often harassed, spit on, and even physically attacked by religious Jewish youth.
I view this phenomenon as extreme and unacceptable in any shape or form. This phenomenon needs to be uprooted.
Earlier incidents include the desecration of a Protestant cemetery on Mount Zion, an attack on international Christians during a day of prayer for Jerusalem, and harassment at a Messianic concert in Jerusalem.
So what you just saw there was the president of Israel speaking out against the harassment that Christians have been facing as a result of these extremist settlers. So I specifically chose that video to be as fair as I can, but it is also obvious and it's also well documented that Christians have been dealing with violent attacks. And yes, that is an important story. That is an incident. That is a situation that people are dealing with on the ground. But if you only care about innocent people who have the same religion as you, I don't know if that makes you a good person. I think that we should see value in all human lives, regardless of what their faith happens to be, whether they're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. And so that's really my take on this story. We need to get our heads out of this tribal thinking and value humanity, value human lives. That's where I'm coming from. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back for the second hour of the show, we've got a lot more to get to. I can't wait to share that fun story of Trump's lawyers making a pretty embarrassing yet hilarious mistake. So stick around for that and more when we come back.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks.
Ooh.
Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Such a big fan.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. I'm referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Indisputable is still the fastest growing news show in America compared to CNN, Fox News, and 30 other networks. We tell the truth on Indisputable because the truth is indisputable. We go places that other news media outlets refuse to go. When there were human rights abuses happening at the Victorville prison, guards and members of the community contacted us.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
It really doesn't take much to be a trusted voice. All it takes is to be fearless, report on matters, be an advocate. I called it the bullpen intentionally because it's a place of preparation. We present individuals who may have an opposing view, so we debate. Sometimes we interview individuals because their stories deserve to be heard. A survivor of significant police misconduct and his attorney. We covered this story earlier, and to remind you of the horror of one man being shot at damn near 100 times by the police. We take time on this show to showcase the temper tantrums of Karens in the wild. We do this not because we want to see people's emotional outbursts in public, but because these incidents are emblematic of a bigger societal issue taking place across the nation, and it has to be checked.
My friend, my big homie, attorney at law, Benjamin Crump.
I just want to thank you, man. Educated, articulate brothers like yourself speak truth to power. It makes a great difference in changing the landscape in America. So
listen, no matter what you do, don't allow the politics of ideology to evaporate the soul that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform, so I won't stop. You won't stop either.
Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat your call.
Like
extremely political.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Anna Kasparian. I just want to read some comments real quick before we move on. Diego Ortiz writes in our member section and says, "Hi Anna, I found your bonus episode last night to be incredibly candid, honest, and insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your soul with us. Very excited for part 2 tonight." Yes, I did get, in fact, I got a little too candid and I got nervous about it after the fact, but I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And yes, we will be continuing with the Ask Me Anything for tonight's bonus episode as well. I want to talk a little bit about where our tax dollars are going because, well, there was a fascinating report done, an analysis of US Americans and their tax dollars, what we're spending the money on, what kind of programs we're funding, and the results are pretty depressing, but it really depends on what your priorities are. My priorities are to take care of our fellow Americans, to make lives better for Americans. Doesn't seem like we're prioritizing that. So let's talk about why. In 2023, the average American contributed more tax dollars to the Pentagon than they did to K-12 education, food stamps, and the child tax credit combined, by a lot. Now, this was analysis done by the Institute for Policy Studies. They put out a report and it certainly is eye-opening. Let's get into the details. Let's see what they found. So in 2023, the average US taxpayer contributed $4,308 for Medicare and Medicaid versus $5,109 for militarism and its support systems. That is pretty incredible, guys. And I'm really happy that they did this analysis because this is one of the issues that I'm curious about. Like, what does our government prioritize? And I think that our resources are incredibly important. I know that none of us enjoy seeing major portions of our income taken out of our paychecks every single time we get paid, but we're okay with it as long as that money is actually bettering the lives of our fellow Americans. But that doesn't seem to be the priority here. So militarism and its support systems, what does that mean? It's really important to give you all the context and details of how this was conducted and what they consider militarism to be. Well, that includes funding the Pentagon, nuclear weapons. Remember, it's not just building nuclear weapons, it's about maintaining nuclear weapons, which is an expensive thing to do. Aid to foreign militaries, veterans programs, which the average taxpayer gave $1,155 for. I want to be clear that I am in favor of supporting our veterans, so I'm not against that, even though that is included in the analysis. Deportations and border militarization and federal spending on policing and prisons. Now in 2023, according to this analysis, the average US taxpayer contributed just $346 for K-12 education versus $2,974 specifically for the Pentagon. Okay, so that shows you how little we invest in education versus how much we're funding the Pentagon. More than half of that money is allocated for the Pentagon, or half of that money that is allocated to the Pentagon, I should say, ends up going to defense contractors. So these are, corporations that end up profiting through war. In 2023, the average US taxpayer contributed $516 for food stamps versus $1,748 for Pentagon contractors. So these are private contractors that have been hired by the Pentagon. And there's more. Let's break it down even further and name specific private defense contractors that are getting the money. So in 2023, the average US taxpayer contributed $110 for the child tax credit versus $249 for Pentagon contracts for Lockheed Martin specifically. See, it's one thing to have one giant figure, which is what we typically talk about when we discuss military funding, right? When we talk about money that goes to the Pentagon, money that goes to defense contractors. It's an entirely different thing to kind of break it down to a granular level and see what, on average, Americans are spending on very specific things, right? But there's more. So to be more specific, that tax money is going right to the pockets of pretty wealthy executives that head these companies or these defense contractors. So in 2021, the most recent year with complete stats, the nation's top 5 weapons makers, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman grabbed over $116 billion in Pentagon contracts and paid their top executives $287 million. Corporate giants like Boeing and Raytheon depend on government contracts for about half the dollars they rake in. For Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Northrop Grumman, it's at least 70%. So the federal government, through our tax dollars, is propping up these defense contractors. I mean, it's not even close. The numbers speak for themselves. And look, those numbers are outrageous on their own, and they're especially maddening in the context of US military aid to Israel, which has in fact spent 6 months inflicting a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of death in Gaza. So in 2016, the Obama administration had signed a 10-year agreement to supply Israel with $3.8 billion annually. Most of that in foreign military financing grants, which allow Israel to buy American weaponry. So that's the other thing. You know, there have been some supporters of Israel in Israel's government, of course, who have kind of spoken out against the critics of the Biden administration and his willingness to keep sending military aid to Israel. And what they tend to argue is, yeah, look, the US government is sending us money, but they don't understand that there are strings attached with that money. We must use that money to buy American weapons. I'm supposed to feel good about that? That doesn't make the situation any better. What that ends up being is a redistribution of wealth from American taxpayers and into the pockets of the executives at these defense contractors, at these companies that serve as defense contractors. And here's the real insult to injury here. The State Department said in March that it had received written assurances from Israel, as the United States requires of all countries that receive American arms, that the supplied weapons would be used in accordance with international humanitarian law. That has not been a reality. That has not been proven based on how Israel is conducting this war. Just today, UNICEF reported that they were hit with IDF fire as they were attempting to deliver humanitarian aid in Rafah. Luckily, in this particular case, and the last time I checked, I mean, the story might have changed since I read it a few hours ago, but luckily, based on what I read, no one died from that attack. But this is what, the 27th humanitarian aid convoy that's been attacked by the IDF? I mean, how many times does that need to happen? Anyway, that was just after Israel had, of course, killed 7 World Central Kitchen workers who were trying to deliver humanitarian aid and had been coordinating exactly where they were in the Gaza Strip so the IDF wouldn't target them. But they were targeted with not 1, not 2, but 3 drone strikes. More importantly, the actions of the United States are making the world, in my opinion, less stable overall, but it's not just my opinion. Rising powers will be happy to cite US precedent as they assert their own expectations to international law. For as Gaza shows in a horrific manner, a world with exceptions to international law is one in which the least powerful suffer the most. And that's entirely true. And that destabilization is unfortunately happening on the US taxpayers' dime. So just something to keep in mind when you consider what is prioritized by our current American government, what gets funded the most, and question whether our money is well spent. Because when I take a look at the amount of money that's being sent to this brutal war in Gaza, I don't feel good about it. It doesn't make me feel that we're using our resources in the best possible way. And there is a growing community of American voters who feel that way, not just on the left, but you're starting to see that criticism, that critique on the right as well. And so I don't know what that is going to lead to. I don't know if anytime soon we're going to find ourselves with a government that actually prioritizes the American people over the Pentagon and wars abroad. We're not there yet, but there is a groundswell, a growing population of American voters on both sides of the political aisle who have had enough of this, and I don't blame them. We're gonna dive into some fun when we come back from the break. I'll give you that story that I was teasing about earlier. Donald Trump and his defense attorneys made some pretty bad mistakes recently in one of the cases he's indicted for. That and more coming up. We'll see you then. In and says, Anna, yesterday you said you tell your younger self not to go into journalism. What would have been your career choice if not journalism, which I believe you have been doing a bang up job? I honestly don't know. I feel passionate about what I do. So it's not about the craft itself. It's more about the industry, and I can't stand the industry. It's awful. But with that in mind, I don't know what I would do. I like to be handy. I really like carpentry, so I would probably start my own small business and do either millwork or carpentry. Install built-ins for people's houses and stuff. I just really enjoy doing that, and I've done a little bit of it for my own home. So maybe that, but maybe I'd hate that. I have no idea. I've just been so hyper-focused on this career path that I haven't really given myself enough breathing room to consider what else I would do. Okay, let's go to, let's go over to Twitch, where we have Gambrit Can, who resubscribed with Prime for 12 months and on fire as usual. Thank you, I appreciate the fire emoji. Peachy Shari says, take Iran and Israel out of it for a second. If Japan just up and attacked China, should we just run to Japan's aid even though we are obligated to? They started it, they acted stupidly. Israel is acting stupidly, which is putting it mildly. Well, you know where I stand on that. I mean, if a country that is our ally starts engaging in military activity and starts provoking another country to go to war, I think it would be unfair to drag the United States into it, but we will be dragged into it. That's for sure. Kingo Hart, 2005 says, not sure I believe Tucker has found religion. Yeah, to me, it's less about Tucker, right? Like to be entirely honest, I don't trust Tucker Carlson, but going after him as viciously as conservatives have been going after him for simply doing an interview with a Christian pastor from Bethlehem, I just think that it's ridiculous, especially coming from a crowd that purported to care so much about free speech and allowing for difficult conversations to take place. Ryu Rawl says, AKA now that Tucker isn't on Fox and is saying the same thing about war, he is disloyal and a fraud? Okay, Dan, I hate Tucker, but he at least has always spoken against war, well, mostly. Yeah, I mean, look, he has been consistent recently about his anti-war, America first ideology. Again, I have a difficult time trusting him, but he did have that kind of commentary at Fox News. You're right about that. It's just that he touched something super sensitive, which is a little bit of a conundrum for conservatives, right? Like, what do you do about the persecution of Palestinian Christians, which they seem to care a little more about than Palestinian Muslims? All right, we've got a lot more comments. I'll read more of them later in the show. We got to get back to the show though. So let's do that and I'll see you in a minute. Art Guy writes in and says, so I've started saying, get off my balls in regular conversation, and I blame Anna for introducing my impressionable, innocent brain to such uncouth language. I mean, at least you've got balls. Like, I don't even have balls and I say get off my balls. Like, that's not good. But I hear you, It is certainly uncouth, but it's fun to say, isn't it? All right, let's get to our next story. This one's, in my opinion, pretty fun and funny. So, the defense attorneys in one of Trump's many legal cases just disproved one of Trump's claims that he only hires the best people by sending a subpoena to the wrong person. Trump, you gotta do something about the statement that you made earlier. Let's watch.
What would be your criteria in choosing the senior administrators?
Track record, great competence, love of what they're doing, how they're getting along with people, references. I mean, no different than when you're running a company, how you hire top people. We have to get the best people. We need to get the best and the finest, and if we don't, we'll be in trouble for a long period of time.
You gotta get better attorneys. I mean, you're gonna be in trouble for a long time, Trump, if you get the kind of attorneys who end up subpoenaing the wrong person. All right, so let's fill in the blanks. What happened here? Well, last month, Trump's attorneys in his criminal hush money case in Manhattan sought to subpoena the Jeremy Rosenberg, who was a supervising investigator in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Now, Rosenberg ended up getting suspended as an investigator for Alvin Bragg because he ended up making a dumb mistake. He decided to contact Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, and apparently that went against their ethics and their rules. So Trump's lawyers wanted Rosenberg's records of communication with Michael Cohen starting from February of 2021. Okay, so that's what the subpoena was all about. They wanted to know what kind of conversation Rosenberg was having with Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney. So they subpoenaed Jeremy Rosenberg, just not the right one. They got the wrong Jeremy Rosenberg. I know it sounds crazy, but there's more than one Jeremy Rosenberg in the world, okay? So court filings revealed that the subpoena actually went to another individual with the same name, Jeremy Rosenberg, who actually has zero connection to the case, zero, okay? And he actually lives in Brooklyn. So the wrong Rosenberg decided to have a little fun with this subpoena request. And so he responded with the following message. I don't have any files for you. P.S. The phone number you provided was disconnected. PPS, I'm keeping the $15. Now, what's the $15? Well, apparently Trump's attorneys had included $15 in their communications with the wrong Rosenberg because they wanted to pay for the files getting sent to them, right? The files that they had requested. That cost some money, so they ensured that they covered the cost of sending the files that they had subpoenaed. Now, let's get to the lawyer who made this mistake. So that lawyer is Blanche. Let me see if I can get his full first name. Okay, so sorry guys, I totally lost the name of the lawyer here. Oh, Todd Blanche, there we go. Okay, so Trump's attorney is Todd Blanche, okay? So Blanche still didn't seem to understand that he sent the subpoena to the wrong person, which is kind of disastrous, and wrote to the court complaining that Rosenberg was not being cooperative. He was being very bad, very uncooperative. It's just that, you reached out to the wrong Rosenberg. Blanche had complained that the man that he believed to be the former investigator Rosenberg had displayed a flippant and dismissive approach to his subpoena, despite ample experience with the criminal justice system that should have instilled in him respect for this process and a criminal defendant's rights. Interesting. I mean, does your client have respect for the process? It doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it. But nonetheless, the prosecutors were the ones to end up getting in touch with the correct person. Like, think about that. The prosecutors are like, yo, Trump's defense attorney, we'll help you out, okay? We'll get in touch with the person you're trying to reach, the person you're trying to subpoena here. And so they get in touch with the correct person and inform the court that Trump's lawyers had made a mistake. After receiving defendant's pre-motion letter, the people spoke with Mr. Rosenberg's counsel, who informed the people that Mr. Rosenberg was not, in fact, served with the subpoena, that Mr. Rosenberg had not corresponded with defense counsel, and that Mr. Rosenberg does not have any connection to the Brooklyn address where the subpoena purportedly was served. On top of this, Big L, Trump had made some unsuccessful attempts to get the case tossed. It has not been tossed, and again, those attempts were unsuccessful. In 3 days, the judge rejected his bid to delay the trial while he fights the gag order against him 3 separate times. Okay, so that's what Trump is dealing with. He's been pretty irate about that. So the case will move forward, and the gag order is still in place. But remember, Trump hires the best people. He really does the work, guys. He puts in the work. He does the background checks. He looks for references, right? I don't know what kind of references he spoke to when it came to Todd Blanche, because Todd Blanche, like when the wrong Rosenberg responded to him and let him know, like, I don't have any files for you, I'm keeping the $15, like that should have been a little bit of a hint. But instead, he got super salty about it because he still thought that was the right Rosenberg and complained about how this individual doesn't respect the process. It's just so funny. But make sure you dot your I's, cross your T's. I mean, if this is the defense attorney representing you in the hush money case, not good. All right, let's move on to our next story. This one is fascinating because it has to do with a veteran of NPR who is kind of speaking out against how NPR has been conducting itself in recent years. So let's take a look.
You know, I've been at NPR a long time, 25 years. You could say I'm a lifer. And it's a place I've always loved working. But when I started, there was a liberal orientation, but I think we were more guided by curiosity, open-mindedness. I think that's evolved over the years into a much narrower kind of niche thinking, a group think that's really clustered around a very selective, progressive views that they don't allow enough air, enough spaciousness to consider all kinds of perspectives.
You just heard from a veteran editor over at NPR. His name is Yuri Berliner, and he penned a lengthy piece on the Free Press in regard to the changes that he has experienced firsthand over at NPR. And he is in fact critical of NPR. He feels that some of the changes in the way they cover the news has actually been negative, and he's hoping that things turn around. The piece is titled, "I've been at NPR for 25 years. Here's how we lost America's trust." And I think that he makes several excellent points in the piece. I don't agree with everything he writes in the piece, but I do want to share both the elements I agree with, the elements I disagree with, and some of the feedback and backlash he has gotten as a result for writing about this. Now, he is not a fan of Trump. He does make that abundantly clear, but he also makes clear that he started seeing changes in the way NPR reported the news around 2016 when Trump became president or was running for president and when the election was taking place. So Trump is also now, unfortunately, using this piece that was penned by Berliner to argue that NPR should be defunded. We'll get to that. I disagree with that, but I'm hoping that this will be a teachable moment for NPR and that they improve moving forward. Because again, I do think that Yuri makes some great points here. Now, let's break down what Berliner had to say about his current employer. He summarizes his basic thesis as follows. It's true NPR has always had a liberal bent, but during most of my tenure here, an open-minded, curious culture prevailed. Today, those who listen to NPR or read its coverage online find something different. The distilled worldview of a very small segment of the United States population. Now, Berliner states that the change, again, began during the election of Donald Trump. He says that Trump's election in 2016 was greeted at NPR with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and despair. But what began as tough, straightforward coverage of a belligerent, truth-impaired president veered toward efforts to damage or topple Trump's presidency. So that excerpt to me is very important to share with you all because it's clear that he's no fan of Trump, but in his heart, I can tell that he really values journalistic principles, which require you to be fair to all parties, including the politicians you do not favor. And I'm gonna admit that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I know that I have failed in that regard. I think a lot of people fail in that regard because we're human. So I totally understand where people are coming from. I understand where he's coming from, and I think that he does make a good point there. Now, he says that persistent rumors that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia over the election became the catnip that drove reporting. But when the Mueller report found no credible evidence of collusion, NPR's coverage was notably sparse. In fact, in his piece, Berliner also focuses on how NPR, during this time, during the Russia investigation, would just take Congressman Adam Schiff's statements as gospel. They wouldn't question it, they wouldn't look into it, they wouldn't, try to find corroborating, evidence to bolster what Schiff would say. They would just print it. And Berliner felt that that was not the right way to go in doing accurate journalism and accurate coverage of the Russia investigation. And he also explains that his issue isn't with the fact that NPR was incorrect on that story, right? As we made mistakes on that story too, because we were reading outlets like NPR and relying on them for their coverage. But his issue is really with the fact that NPR never acknowledged that they had made a mistake. And conversely, Berliner describes how NPR deliberately ignored the Hunter Biden laptop story, which, that story was also something that was immediately discredited, wrongly so, because there was this narrative that it was a Russian propaganda, it was orchestrated by Russia in order to throw the election in favor of Donald Trump. And I bought into that argument too. So I think Berliner makes a good point here. During a meeting with colleagues, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said it was good we weren't following the laptop story because it could help Trump. And that's the thing, guys. I think this is where some issues have come up in recent years. Because if you're a journalist, you report the news. You don't make decisions about what you do and don't report based on which politician you could be helping or hurting, right? And I see that that decision gets made quite often, whereas before there was a little more fairness in covering everything rather than having reporters see that or editors see themselves as activists first and journalists second. When you're an activist, well then you make decisions based on what your political preferences are. When you're a journalist, you focus on fairness, objectivity, not neutrality, objectivity, and you want to get to the bottom of the story, you want to get the facts. And so Berliner says that's something that kind of started to fall apart over at NPR. According to Berliner, NPR similarly dismissed the COVID lab leak story. So he gives a lot of different examples. Now, let's pivot to who he blames in the piece for this change in direction. He points a finger at the former NPR CEO, his name is John Lansing, who took the position back in 2019, obviously a year before the racial reckoning that we had in this country, the George Floyd murder that took place in 2020. So Berliner claims that NPR leadership gave the following guidance in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. America's infestation with systemic racism was declared loud and clear. It was a given. Our mission was to change it. Now, again, if you are an advocate, an activist, an ally, your mission is to change it. If you're a journalist, though, or a journalistic outlet or publication, as NPR is that really your job, or is your job to report the facts and of the current events that you're reporting on as they stand? And so that conflict was taking place within the newsroom over at NPR, and it appears that no one really had the guts to speak out against it until recently with this piece that was penned by Berliner. Lansing declared that diversity on our staff and in our audience was the overriding mission, the North Star of the organization. Phrases like "that's part of the North Star" became part of meetings and more casual conversation. And look, I think diversity is a good thing, right? You should seek diversity, not just in the workplace, but in your audience. And the way you get a more diverse audience is by, being fair to all sides. Don't cover the truth, don't provide cover for people who are doing the wrong thing. I'm not advocating for that, but by ensuring that you have different perspectives represented in your coverage. Race and identity became paramount in nearly every aspect of the workplace. Journalists were required to ask everyone we interviewed their race, gender, and ethnicity, among other questions, and had to enter it in a centralized tracking system. We were given unconscious bias training sessions. A growing DEI staff offered regular meetings imploring us to start talking about race. And what he noticed was there's this interesting dynamic playing out. On one hand, you see an increase in diversity in the workers over at NPR, but there's no diversity in thought, right? There's a very similar ideology being presented by everyone who's working at NPR, and he thought that that was a problem. He wanted diversity of thought, not just diversity based on skin color. And so he states that eventually an unspoken consensus emerged in NPR, stemming mainly from the lack of viewpoint diversity. Stories on how the Beatles and bird names are racially problematic, and others that are alarmingly divisive, justifying looting with claims that fears about crime are racist, and suggesting that Asian Americans who oppose affirmative action have been manipulated by white conservatives. So those were the things that he took issue with over at NPR. And I don't know how NPR is going to respond to the fact that he wrote this piece, but he does conclude that while his coworkers are congenial and hardworking, he believes that NPR needs more ideological diversity. To his point, in DC, where NPR is headquartered, and many of us live, I found 87 registered Democrats working in editorial positions, and 0 Republicans, none. And look, guys, I do think it's important to have people you disagree with working with you, because they're gonna provide a perspective that might force you to reconsider the way you're reporting a story. Maybe there's a fact that you're unaware of, and you might be unaware of it because we all live in filter bubbles depending on what our political ideology is. And so, again, it's one thing to support the idea of diversity based on skin color, and I do think that it is important to have diversity in the workplace, but it's not just about skin color, it's also about viewpoints. It's also about lived experiences. It's also about ideology. You want diversity of ideology represented as well. The audience of NPR now reflects the makeup of the company. So back in 2011, for instance, although NPR's audience tilted a bit to the left, it still bore a resemblance to America at large. 26% of listeners described themselves as conservative, 23% as middle of the road, and 37% as liberal. But things changed, and they changed substantially. So by 2023, the picture was completely different. Only 11% described themselves as very or somewhat conservative, 21% as middle of the road, and 67% of listeners said they were very or somewhat liberal. we weren't just losing conservatives, we were also losing moderates and traditional liberals. Now, this has led to some backlash, which honestly, I don't know if I agree with. So let's start with Mehdi Hassan, who says, this essay has it backwards. You can't blame NPR for conservatives not listening. You have to ask why conservatives have gone down conspiracy holes, climate change, 2020 election, vaccines, and how on earth mainstream media is supposed to cater to them now. But I think in that statement, Mehdi Hassan makes a mistake that I myself was making for a long time, where I was just lumping in all conservatives as one thing. They're all QAnon believers. They're all this, they're all that, but there are gradations, there are factions within the Republican Party and among conservatives. Right now, there's actually a growing divide among traditional conservatives who tend to side with the neocon faction of the Republican Party. And then you have the MAGA crowd, the America First crowd that's much more isolationist. And so I think it's a mistake to kind of conflate everyone and lump them all together. The same thing can be said about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has so many different factions at this point. I mean, you have the progressive end of the political spectrum on the Democrat side. You have the Democrats who are more in line, honestly, with neoconservatives when it comes to foreign policy. So again, like I would hate to be lumped in with that crowd of the Democratic Party, right? So I think, again, it's important to have different perspectives represented because it gives you a more nuanced worldview and it leads to more accurate reporting. Finally, Donald Trump, of course, he's used this as an opportunity to advocate for defunding NPR. He said, no more funding for NPR, total scam. Editors said they have no Republicans and is only used to damage Trump. They are a liberal disinformation machine, not $1. Well, I disagree with that. I wouldn't want to defund NPR, but I do think this could potentially be a teachable moment. Berliner says that after he penned this piece, some of his colleagues reached out to him, obviously in private. I've had this experience myself, where they thanked him for speaking out and they're hoping that things change for the better. Lansing is no longer the CEO of NPR, so things might actually change, we'll see. But I don't want it to change in a way that is unfair to the left and overly fair to the right. We just need accurate, straight news reporting. We've got a ton of people doing commentary, including myself, including everyone at TYT. But when it comes to straight news reporting, we need it to be straight. We need to know the facts and we need to know the reality of any situation that we're covering. We're never gonna know that reality if it's highly influenced by one specific political ideology. Anyway, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we've got a lot more to get to, including Sean Hannity having a panic attack over Arizona's anti-abortion laws. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. All right, I'm gonna read some comments about the NPR segment that I just did. Up until late 2015, and this is from Plastic Brick Dragon. Up until late 2015, I was a reliable NPR supporter. But when I heard them getting into bed with Hillary Rodham Clinton and their biased coverage for her against Sanders, I stopped. Just one look at their board. They are just shy of being a corporate media company just like any other. To be honest, I really could not care if they get defunded. I now fund the NPR podcast I listen to directly, especially WNYC. Now NPR is, for me, a glorified alarm clock. All right, interesting. And yeah, they were certainly overwhelmingly in favor of Hillary over Bernie Sanders. So you're right about that. And I think they did lose a lot of listeners as a result of that. Ruminari says, I wish the United States had a real public broadcasting station where the three mainstream ideologies had equal time to broadcast. You're actually hearkening back to a wonderful time in media for America, and that was when the Fairness Doctrine was intact. And what the Fairness Doctrine ensured was that all sides of any contentious issue received airtime, right? So they can make their case. And that led to Americans being more informed about all sides so they can get to the bottom of the truth. And I think that that was a better time in America. One of the people who was just rabidly against that was Rush Limbaugh. And once the Fairness Doctrine was just totally dismantled, Rush Limbaugh blew up. So I agree with your perspective on this entirely. Adrian Adrian Aspecia says, I can see Anna as a shrink. I'm so sorry if I messed up your name. I'm really bad with names. Please don't hate me. Santos Wante says, man, look at that optimism from Mike Pence in the background of that 2016 video. I noticed that too. Incredible. Let's see. The Creative Dragon says, I can see Anna as a hairstylist. I don't think I'd want to be a hairstylist, but I appreciate the work they do. Very important work, especially when the grays start coming in. Lacey Love says, I think the fact that you're constantly questioning whether you know enough to share the news is one of the reasons why you're such a solid reporter, Anna. This kind of honesty, both with yourself and with your audience, should be one of the core tenets of all journalism. Thank you for saying that. Again, my responsibility is to the audience, and if they're misinformed, it's because of me, and I have to live with that guilt. And I don't want to live with that guilt. I want to do right by you guys to the best of my ability. All right, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Before we get to our last stories, I wanted to just read the remaining super chats and thank you all who have contributed to TYT through becoming members, through sending us super chats. Cod Sterling writes in and says, yesterday John told me I had to choose a favorite, and I'm gonna say, you're my favorite, Anna. Your passion is appreciated. Cod Sterling, thank you so much for the comment, I appreciate it. YTP Renewed says, perhaps Tucker owes AOC and Ilhan Omar an apology. Doubt that's coming, but I hear you. Don Whitehead says, no one should be dehumanized. Everyone's life is valuable. That's exactly where I'm at, mentally when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. Robe Life says, more robes, less bombs. Oh my God. Can you imagine how much better the world would be if we replaced bombs with nice fluffy robes? Oh, that's the kind of world I want to live in. Jesse writes in and says, asked a friend, bird photographer with 20+ years of experience for the lens. So I was looking for the right lens to take photos of birds when I go bird watching. Thank you for your advice. I have it right in front of me, but I also want to thank Edwin Umania, who's the stage manager here at TYT. He's actually stage managing right now as we speak. He's letting me borrow one of his lenses, and I'm so excited about it. So if I get any good snaps of some cool birds, I'm definitely gonna share it for our members in our bonus episode. So thank you for the advice, Jesse, I really, really appreciate it. Okay, let's get to our next story.
And the people on the left are so desperate, attacking Trump now for an Arizona Supreme Court ruling that upholds what is a Civil War-era law banning abortion. This will be fixed in the next week or two. Let not your heart be troubled. I can pretty much assure that will happen. Trump opposes the law and this ruling, or you can believe Joe's make pretend Donald Trump that doesn't exist.
Is Hannity okay? He seems a little manic there. Like he's panicking. So there you have Sean Hannity, a longtime advocate for anti-abortion policies, freaking out over Arizona and the Supreme Court in that state ruling that this insane, antiquated, this law that was actually established before Arizona was even a state can actually go into effect. So this abortion ban has political ramifications for Republicans because Republican voters don't like it. And Hannity's like, Trump says he doesn't like it. Trump says they should do something about it. They should do away with it. They should dispense of this law. Let's hear more of his argument.
And you know what? Arizona's governor is a Democrat. The state's attorney general is a Democrat. The state legislature is almost evenly divided. If Democrats, you want to get rid of the law, well, you have a chance right now to get rid of it. And I would advise you, get rid of it. They would rather use it as a political tool ahead of November. Most politicians on the left do not actually care about making your life better.
No, this is so good. This is amazing. This is amazing. Sean Hannity is sitting there begging Democrats in the state of Arizona to save Republicans. Because look, I know, we all know, Biden is definitely gonna run on the fact that Republicans have succeeded in rolling back reproductive rights for women, something that is very unpopular. And so what you just heard was Sean Hannity begging Democrats in the state of Arizona to save Republicans. And guess what? They didn't need Sean Hannity to jump in and try to save the Republicans because the Democrats in the state of Arizona appear to actually give a crap about the women living in Arizona, and they've been trying to pass legislation to protect the reproductive rights of women living in Arizona. It's just that there's one major obstacle: Republican lawmakers in the state. So let's get into those details. Democrats, for instance, tried to push bills through the Republican-controlled legislature to repeal the ban. That's exactly what Hannity wants. A move, though, they say would protect women's health and freedom and also force Republicans to take a formal vote on the law. But Republican leaders in the Senate removed one bill from the day's agenda on Wednesday, legislative aides said. So the Republicans are like, nah, I'm not interested. Democrats tried to get it repealed. There's more. In the House, a Republican lawmaker who had called for striking down the law made a motion to vote on a Democratic repeal bill that has sat stalled for months. But Republican leaders quickly scuttled that effort by calling for a recess and later adjourned until next Wednesday. So again, you have Democrats in the state of Arizona doing what they can to try to repeal this law from like the mid 1800s. And Republicans are like, nah, we're gonna play all these games and try to prevent that from happening. According to reports, as the recess was called, Democrats on the Senate floor yelled at their colleagues. They're real fired up about this. They said shame, shame, and save women's lives, but the calls were ignored. Republicans in the House are even criticizing Democrats for trying to force a vote a day after the Supreme Court's ruling that indicated that this law from the 1800s could go into effect. Republican Representative Teresa Martinez said in a floor speech, quote, "We do not want to repeal the pre-Roe law without first having a conversation about it. There is no reason to rush on this very important topic. We must listen to all viewpoints thoroughly. We cannot do that when our colleagues are acting in the way they did this morning." So she's obviously referring to the Democrats who were shouting shame, who were jeering at the Republicans who are preventing them from being able to pass the repeal of that law. Now, Democrats want to have that conversation, they do, but they're working with limited time and ways to reverse the law because of how late it is in the legislative session. So Democratic State Senator Ana Hernandez told the New York Times, quote, "I don't see why we wouldn't move forward. Are they serious about this or are they not? Are they just backpedaling when they realize they're on the losing side of a policy battle?" Arizona Senator President Warren Peterson and House Speaker Ben Tomo also put out a joint statement of their own. They did so on X, writing that the Supreme Court has made its decision and it was one based solely on the text of the law. It was not a policy statement. It's important to note there is at least a 60-day waiting period before any change in the existing law occurs. During this time, we will be closely reviewing the court's ruling, talking to our members, and listening to our constituents to determine the best course of action for the legislature. In other words, we're going to allow this law to stand. But for those of you who are actually concerned about protecting reproductive rights in Arizona, luckily the voters of Arizona will be able to weigh in on this matter. They will get to decide through a ballot initiative whether reproductive rights should be protected in their state. So ultimately, I think it's gonna come down to that. I think the voters in Arizona will decide. I do believe that the Democrats in the lead up to the general election will be using this issue as a campaigning tool, which, I've shared my thoughts about that. While I agree with them in wanting to protect abortion rights, I really wish they would have done more on a national level to protect abortion rights rather than use this as a campaigning tool and only a campaigning tool. But nonetheless, the Republicans who have been fighting for this for the last 50 years got what they wanted. So I find it difficult to understand why Sean Hannity is doing these panicked segments on Fox News demanding for the repeal of these hardline, super strict abortion bans. Isn't this what you wanted, Hannity? Shouldn't you be celebrating? Once they realize that, oh wait, we haven't been listening to our own voters about this, suddenly they want to change course and they're asking Democrats to save them. It really is incredible stuff. All right, in the bonus episode, I'll be answering more of the Ask Me Anything questions from our members. So you can tune into that by going to tyt.com/join. You can also smash that join button and become a member to watch that way. And if you're a member, definitely check it out. I'm looking forward to answering more of your questions, and I'll see you there. love the questions that everyone asked of me yesterday when I did my first round of Ask Me Anythings, but there's a lot of fun questions today. So I wanted to have a second day of Ask Me Anything, just so I can get to some of these questions. I'm gonna start with the first one. So it's, how did you get Charlie? What is your favorite woodworking piece? So I see you asked 2 questions, but I'll answer both of them. So I actually got Charlie on a whim. So what ended up happening was in 2016, I went to do a panel discussion at Politicon. It was being held in Pasadena, California that year. And I remember that panel, it was hilarious. It was the Bernie Sanders panel. No one on that panel except for me was supportive of Bernie Sanders, so I had a lot of fun, okay? The audience was there to hear from people who liked Bernie Sanders. And I was the only one, so as you can imagine, the crowd loved me and I enjoyed the experience. But right after that, my husband he wasn't my husband at the time, but my husband was like, hey, they're having, you guys are gonna pull up a picture of my husband? Oh, come on. I did good, right? I did good. Okay, so anyway, he's like, hey, the Petco is having an adoption event. Do you wanna go play with some dogs? I was like, hell yeah, I wanna go play with some dogs. So it sounds like a good time. So we go to the adoption event. I walk into the room where they have all the different puppies that are up for adoption. And the first one I see in a crib was Charlie. And I had always wanted a dog with floppy ears. So I see this little dog with floppy ears and I just knew, like I fell in love. So I immediately grabbed Charlie. I was like, this one, I wanna adopt this one. And Christian's like, wait, hold on. We didn't come here to adopt a dog. We came here just to look at puppies, like what? And I was like, no, I want the dog. We're gonna get the dog. We're gonna get the dog right now. And so he's like, okay. So he went and like signed up and you're supposed to fill in some paperwork and then you also have to pay a fee because they they get the dogs fixed so they're not reproducing and the person who adopts ends up paying for that, which I was totally fine with. And it was hilarious because as I'm holding Charlie, this group of little boys show up with their mom. And they're like, where's Andy? Where's Andy? Because there was an online listing of the puppies that were up for adoption. And so Charlie's original name was Andy, and they came specifically to adopt Andy. And once I heard that they were looking for Andy, I was like, I wouldn't let go of the dog. They're like, can we pet Andy? Can we pet Andy? And Christian's looking at me like, let them pet the dog, you weirdo. You're being so possessive and weird right now. I was like, okay. Here. Like I wouldn't let go of Charlie. So I regret nothing, okay? I have given that dog a very good life and will continue to give that dog a very good life, but it's just so funny how competitive I got with a group of little boys. Like it was just, so as far as my favorite woodworking piece, it's not really a piece. So my closet was a mess. The way the closet was set up, like with the racks and everything, it was a very cheap job that they had originally done when they built the place, and it wasn't maximizing the space. So the first thing that I used a table saw for was to build the shelving and everything in the walk-in closet. And I'm proud of that because I'll tell you the backstory of why I was proud of that. It's not that I did like a fantastic job. I think I did an okay job. I actually look at some of the work and it's a little shoddy, but I'm an amateur. Give me a break. But I remember after I had like ripped out the old, racks and shelving, and I had like fixed the drywall and everything, I had the table saw in there and it was mostly empty. My dad came to visit and I told my dad, I'm gonna build a closet. And so I show him the closet, like I show him the space, and then he sees the table saw on the ground, and I did not use the table saw on the ground, okay? I had a proper table for it and everything, so everyone calm down. But he looked at the table saw and he had a panic attack and he's like, this is not for the womans, okay? The womans don't do this kind of stuff. He was like so terrified that I was gonna cut a hand off. I didn't cut a hand off, I was totally fine. I built it, and the reason why I'm proud is because after the closet was done, he visited again and I showed him, and he had this like pride, like he had this proud look on his face, and that made me, it was so satisfying. It made me really happy. And after that, he was convinced that it's not just for the men's. It's also for the womans if they want to do like carpentry work or woodworking. So anyway, next question. When are you writing a book? So I was actually working on a book, and then I don't want to give too much away. It's still a project I'm working on. I'm going through, as I talked about on the bonus episode yesterday, some self-reflection, and I feel like I need to go through that self-reflection before I can legitimately write this book. I'm worried about writing it prematurely, but I am working on something, and so I would say stay tuned, but I don't want you to wait years, and I think it's probably gonna take a few years. I'm really like rethinking some stuff, and I need to get through that before writing some of those chapters. Have you ever considered living anywhere else other than California? Yes, I have. Although I love this state, I love how beautiful this state is. I love the natural beauty. I do love the people here. So I don't think I'm gonna be leaving anytime soon. But the person asking this question also says, Austin's pretty nice this year, except for tornadoes. I don't think I could live in Texas, to be honest with you, mostly because of some of the laws that have passed there recently, especially as it pertains to reproductive rights and things like that. I have some friends who live in Austin. I love visiting Austin. What I will say is every time I visited Austin, the people who live there have been so delightful. So yeah, I think I'd be happy in Austin too, but I really want to stay in California and see if I can, maybe fight some of the changes that have been made in the state that I don't think have been very helpful. Anna, since your husband speaks Spanish, have you ever considered learning? It was one of the most enriching things I've ever done. So I took 3 years of Spanish when I was in high school. I didn't speak perfectly, but I was able to get by in conversation. I understand Spanish really well, so oftentimes when we visit Christian's family in Florida, when they start speaking in Spanish, I can follow along and I know what they're talking about. But I do wish that I was more fluent. I wish that I could have a conversation confidently in Spanish. And I think knowing multiple languages is a great thing. I speak Armenian fluently. I can read Armenian at like a 5th grade level, so nothing to write home about. It's a completely different alphabet, so it's a lot more challenging. But I love knowing other languages. I think it's helpful. Will you ever join us for happy hour again? Those were good times. Happy hour? I don't know what that means. Did I ever join? Huh? Oh, happy half hour? Huh. Maybe. I mean, the thing is, happy half hour airs immediately after the main show on a Wednesday. So probably not, because by the time the show's over on Wednesday, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. Okay, Wednesday shows are hard to produce and host. So was today's show, right? Not having a co-host means more work for myself. So, I mean, maybe. I really like Happy Half Hour. You guys should all be watching it. It's a good way to decompress. I like to listen to it as I'm driving home from work. But yeah, I mean, I've been on it before. Indica or sativa? Indica all the way. Sativa it's not for me. I can do a hybrid, but sativa, my brain is like, my brain is already there in my sober state. Why would I want to enhance that with sativa? Some people love sativa. Husband loves sativa. I don't love sativa. I love indica. I want to feel relaxed, and that's what indica does for me. What is one of your all-time favorite / funny behind-the-scenes moments at TYT? Oof, let me think. That is such a good question. Okay, let me think about that. I'll come back to that question. Let me make a note so I don't forget. What are some of your proudest projects at TYT? I don't think I would say that I have a specific project I'm proud of. What I would say about TYT and what makes me most proud about the work I do is that I think you guys can tell that I am willing to say things on the show knowing that it's going to lead to backlash. And it's taken me a very long time to accept something that Cenk says to me, which is that it takes a lot of strength. Like, it takes a strong person to be willing to do that. Not a lot of people are willing to go against the grain, but since I think it's important to challenge myself, I find myself also challenging the audience. Some people appreciate it, others don't. but I'm gonna do it no matter what because it's who I am. So I'm proud of that. At first, I felt like that was a negative thing because why can't I just go along to get along? Why not? Life is so easy that way. People who do that move further in their careers. They're beloved by everyone. Why don't I just do that? And so I do sometimes question why am I the way I am, and why can't I just be a little more, just go with the flow and just say what people want to hear. But I'm actually proud that I'm willing to face backlash. I'm proud that I'm willing to say things knowing that it's gonna lead to backlash. So I would say, broadly speaking, that's what I'm most proud of. If Cenk had somehow won the presidency, if he offered you a cabinet position, would you take it? If so, which one? I actually would really need to meditate on that. Meaning I don't know if I would take a cabinet position. I don't know if I'm qualified for that, right? Obviously, there have been people in government that are not qualified for the positions they've had, so it's never stopped them, but it would stop me because I take it seriously. These kinds of leadership roles take expertise, knowledge. It really depends on what would be offered to me and whether I would feel capable of fulfilling that role in a way that would benefit the country. That's what my number one concern would be. So really great question. Right now, my answer is I really, really don't know, and I'm actually leaning against. What's your current favorite show? Snowfall. Hands down. I'm so addicted to that show. It's so good. No pun intended, by the way, since it's about, the crack cocaine epidemic in Los Angeles. But it is a fantastic show. I highly recommend it. In terms of the classics, shows that I watch reruns of and still feel entertained as I watch the reruns, The Office, Parks and Rec, and Family Guy, which I will say, I can't believe Family Guy has never been canceled. And by the way, if you're thinking about it, please don't cancel. Family Guy is hilarious, but seriously, through 2020, how did Family Guy not get canceled? It's kind of amazing, but it's a funny show. They do hit all sorts of incredibly sensitive political topics, so check it out if you haven't already. What's the funniest political moment you've covered? Oh no, listen, I know there have been a lot of funny moments during Trump speeches or the Trump administration, but how could you not point to George W. Bush declaring that Mandela was dead when he wasn't? Me and my brother talk about that moment almost every time we see each other. Somebody came up to me the other day and they said, where's Mandela? And I told him, Mandela's dead. Saddam Hussein killed all the Mandelas. And the best part about the video is as he's saying it, there's someone probably in the front row of the crowd telling him no, because you see it in his face. He has this moment where he's like, should I stop? No, I'm gonna keep going. It's just so good, it's so funny. Mandela had not passed away. Mandela was not killed by Saddam Hussein, disaster.
Where's Mandela? Well, Mandela's dead.
There were so many funny George Bush clips. Do you have any more, Bart? Oh, let's have fun. Let's have some fun right now. Okay. The Bush era was disastrous, but so many funny moments with him unintentionally.
Internets,
yes, I remember internets. I remember him reading 3 Camus, right? Or 3 Shakespeares and a Camus, yeah. I think he said. 3 Shakespeares and a Camus. Oh my God. He was pretty funny.
I think it's kind of what we call speculation.
Speculation. He's the one who came up with the word strategery, right? Strategery was George W. Bush's word. Yeah, he was a disaster, that's for sure, but he was funny. All right, okay. This is probably my favorite question. When will Cenk pay for your holiday with Kate? That's our producer, Kate, to the Amalfi Coast as a holiday bonus. Here's what we should do. TYT petition. I'm kidding. No, that would be really fun. It's just that I feel like the show might suffer if both me and Kate are gone and we're just like enjoying a luxurious trip in the Amalfi Coast. But that would be awesome. It really would. I would love to go on a trip with everyone in my team. That would be really fun. You know, I think it's important to bond. I think the company should really consider it, you know? We have like these outings sometimes, like, oh, we're gonna go bowling, and let's step it up a notch, TYT. Why don't you send the main show team over to the Amalfi Coast? We can do the show live on location. It could be a lot of fun. All right, so going back to what is your all-time favorite / funny behind the scenes moments? There's too many to note, honestly. A lot of them actually happened in like the first 5 years I was here, because it was such a small company that there weren't really as many rules, right? So that could be a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but in that time period and in the era of TYT, it was a good thing because everyone respected each other and no one was ever terrible to one another, right? So like if you're working at a company that has no rules and people are awful to each other, that's another thing. But there was that family feel, and I remember after we would wrap the show every day, me, Jank, JR, Jesus, and Dave would just have our post-production meeting, which was just shooting the shit, like just joking around, having fun. And then Edwin was the next hire. I remember, like, I think you started working at TYT 2 years after I was hired, or 2009. I started in 2007. Edwin started in 2009. Do you remember those meetings that we would have after the show? And it was just, I miss that. Like I miss the, you know, that camaraderie, that laid back feel. There were also downsides to that era of TYT. Since we were so small, we were paid so little. Our set was awful. Like we had this terrible, giant, clunky 80s set that had these like little TVs incorporated in the background. And every morning, like I'd have to go behind the set and turn all the little TVs on. And like, it was so awful. But you know, sometimes the journey to where you're trying to go is even more fun than getting to the destination, right? So I try to think about it that way. There really isn't any specific thing. There were some fun stories that we covered, like the, what was the name of the politician? The guy from the village of Minerva?
Phil Davidson.
Phil Davidson, who was running for like this,
City council.
Not even city council or treasurer. It was like, I don't know, small role. Oh, was it county treasurer? Okay, so this Republican who was running for county treasurer in this small town, and he gave like this insane speech, which we've played on the show before fairly recently, but it was fun. Like I loved covering those kinds of stories. It's now a more saturated digital media market, and those kinds of stories, they just don't make as much sense to cover because A, there's a lot of other important current event stories that we need to cover, but also, you know, those stories end up getting lost in the shuffle and they get no views, but it costs a lot of money to produce those stories and air those stories. And so some of those topics end up falling by the wayside these days. And I miss covering that kind of stuff because it was fun. And we still try to do those stories here and there, but you'll notice if you go to our YouTube channel, they don't perform as well. And it's because people are looking for the more substantive news that's occurring in the country. And so we cover that instead. But anyway, that's a long answer to your question, but I hope it answers your question.
Tell your neighbors, tell Randy Gonzalez, I'm coming.
I'm coming. That guy was fired up and maybe on something. Dragon Lord writes in and says, hey Anna, I have a really nice robe that has big pockets and a hoodie. Let me just say something real quick. This is a note for all robe makers, all robe sewers, manufacturers, and honestly, anyone who sews dresses as well, they must have pockets. They must have, everyone wants a pocket, at least one. When there's no pocket, I just feel like the garment is pretty much useless. And I'm saying that as someone who's wearing a dress that doesn't have any pockets right now. But I love a pocket. I love multiple pockets. I love beer, okay. So anyway, thank you for writing in. Since we've got a little bit of time left, I'm gonna read some member comments, starting with Howard Wilson, who says Tucker's face is a milk-drunk baby in a wig. Great comment, I appreciated that. Jeremy Doyle, who's been a member for 28 months, says, It is naive, I know, but if Tucker Carlson's anti-Semitism gets more people to oppose the Israeli slaughter of Palestinians, I'm here for it. I really didn't hear anything in that interview, though, that was anti-Semitic. He's being accused of being anti-Semitic for simply doing the interview in the first place, and I totally disagree with that take. David Bergen says, does the lower funding of education lead to more kids enlisting in the military? Wondering if there is any data on that. That's a good question. That is a good question, and I don't have the answer to it, but someone should look into that. Neil Whittington, who's been a member for 36 months, says, regarding GD, I've been designing subs for 20 years. Our contracts have not been increased. By the way, nuclear subs are only powered with a nuke reactor, no missiles. All right, that is good to know. Killjoy 100 says, that Jeremy Rosenberg is really George Santos, a plot twist. So that's in regard to a story that I did where Trump's lawyers sent a subpoena to the wrong Jeremy Rosenberg. Stephen in real life says, oh yeah, no, I have not read this. Stephen in real life writes in and says, I quit NPR in 2016 and brought my donations to TYT because NPR did Sanders so dirty and because of their conflicts of interest involving their largest donors. That is really interesting to know. And thank you for contributing to the show and for being a member. Special thanks to our new members. That includes Lepton Soup 337 with the comment, am I back? I'm back. It's good to have you. Thank you again for joining. Aaron Phillips and Joshua Gravely are also new TYT members. So everyone, welcome our new members to our TYT community. Thank you for becoming members and supporting the show. Let's read a few more comments and then we'll wrap up. In our Twitch subs, we've got Ghost Dog TV who says, Republicans have millions of dollars invested in keeping the left and religious folks apart. Tucker is ruining their investment. That is an interesting perspective, and I think that there's some truth to that. The DeGauzer says, doesn't matter what you believe, you don't deserve 2,000-pound bombs dropped on your head every single day. Totally agree with you on that, and that's totally in line with what I was saying. I don't care about the religion or faith of the civilians that are getting killed. I care about the fact that civilians are getting killed. AJ Nestor says, my mother, who was born in 1930, always felt that women had the right to use the word shit because they saw so much of it as mothers. That's funny and very true. Angie Pepper says, oh God, wouldn't want those Lockheed Martin CEOs to not get lunch. Yep. I mean, it would appear that our government's priorities agree with that notion. T-Pain 89 says, my dad's a carpenter and went back to refresh his credentials and learn new techniques at 56. He says you're never too old. I love that. And I'm super curious what kind of stuff he builds. If he builds any furniture or cabinets, like it's cool when you have skills like that and you can be self-sufficient and build things for yourself. I don't know, I just love it. I think that there's something very satisfying to that craft. Green New Dealer Dragon says, I used to listen to Left, Right, and Center. Me too. I used to love Left, Right, and Center. I used to listen to Left, Right, and Center a lot. It bothered me strongly that they would always have corporate Democrats to represent the left and the progressive viewpoint was never allowed. Well, there was a producer for Left, Right, and Center who really liked me. And she really fought to have me come on. And luckily I was able to go on the show twice. And I did not get the sense that the host liked me. And so even though that producer was fighting to have me on more often, it just didn't come to fruition, which made me sad because I like that format. I really like hearing the arguments from the different perspectives represented in that show. And I like the fact that they were having those conversations without things devolving into name calling, like you're actually hearing people out. And I thought that was very valuable. But I totally agree with your critique in that the Democratic side was often represented by the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And after a while, I just kind of got tired of it and I stopped listening. But look, I enjoy breaking points. I like the fact that Sauger and Crystal Ball come from different perspectives and they debate oftentimes. And I like the way that they debate because you can see that they have a mutual respect for each other, but they're still making a case for their ideology, and I think that's important. So I do seek out those kinds of shows because I do want to understand what the other side genuinely believes. I don't want to rely on corporate media telling me what the other side generally believes, because when I have relied on corporate media to do that in the past, I've gotten stories wrong. And I want to know the truth. I want to know what people actually believe, right? I don't want to trash people based on what others have told me about them, right? So look, I'm doing my best here, guys. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you feel your voices are heard. And as always, I love when I get constructive feedback that can help me improve, especially if we miss something and missed a detail in a story. It happens. Again, we're human. We do a 2.5-hour show every day. We're not gonna get every single thing perfectly right. And so it's important for us to correct ourselves moving forward if we do get something wrong. So thank you for being members and doing this show together with us. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. We appreciate you so, so much, and thank you. Thank you for allowing us to do what we love so much here at TYT. All right, I hope I answered all of your questions. Thank you for writing in. I hope you guys have an awesome night, a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.
I've got an eclectic reading list. The key for me is to keep expectations low. If the job description were what do you do, it's decision maker.
Exaggerations